Hi everybody, I'm Carl from 2654E and I wanted to do a quick walkthrough of our Tier 3 robot before we take it apart for the season. Alright, so the first thing I want to go over is the drivetrain. We run a 360 RPM drivetrain with 55 watts. So you can see we have 5.5 here, same on both sides. And then we have an 11 watt back there. And we have another 11 watt mounted on the bracing that goes to the main upright for the lift. The 5.5 watt has a little bit of funky gearing, but we have the 200 RPM goes into here, this gear here. Then we go into this 12 tooth, and that brings the 200 RPM of the 5.5 watt up to the speed of 600 RPM, which is what the other two motors run at. And then that 12 tooth in there is just free spinning on the shaft that the 5.5 watt spins on. So that allows us to transmit that power up to the front wheel. You can see that even with the gearing for the 5.5 watt, the drivetrain is very, very low friction still. And that is partially due to our screw joints, which not only help with the friction a lot, but they allow the drivetrain to be very strong. Even after we've dropped it from Tier 3 a few times, the wheelbase still is very, very low friction. There's really nothing we've needed to do. We just put it on when we first built it and we haven't had to do anything since. It also really helps prevent twisting, just so that means we don't need as many crossbars. In terms of the crossbars we do have, however, it is one full width C-channel right there and a full length high strength shaft. C-channel just positioned with some scraps here. And we use shoulder screws to help keep everything square. And then this high strength shaft on the back, pretty standard, but it really helps with the goal clamp. Another thing you can see here is on that screw joint for the Omni wheel, the screw in the middle, which is what the wheel pivots on, is actually offset up a little bit. And what that allows, we also have the same type of thing on the back as well. You can see that's a little bit higher than the other ones. But that allows the traction wheel to be offset downwards, which means both of the Omni wheels bear less weight, which not only helps us turn easier, but it also means that we have a much higher resistance to sideways pushing. And there's just less force on the Omni wheel, so it's really nice for driving, and it's also really nice for programming because we don't need odometry. The next thing to look at is the PTO. So you can see in there we have this piston, and it's just a single 25mm piston. So that's the smallest size, and it's just one for the entire PTO. So you can see it pushes that way, also pushes the other way. So just less air, less weight. If I go in there, you can see that we have these two spacers, and those are mounted on the piston. It's a little difficult to access, but you can see that when I push the piston, it slides the gear into the drivetrain, which engages the winch, which is also on that shaft there. It's a little bit easier to see on the other side, but we just have some strings spooled up there. So that's the PTO. The shaft itself is mounted on these polycarbonate plates here that also mount the upright. It's a little bit difficult to see, but just mounted in there with some bearings. Another thing you'll notice is that our back clamp here pivots on that high strength shaft for the PTO. So that helps keep our weight down because we don't have to add any sort of additional structure. You can also see that with our pistons. Instead of adding an additional support to mount the pistons, we've just ran them all the way to that front drivetrain crossbar. So that's really helped keep our weight down. So for the back clamp, we don't have any kind of aligner or anything. We just use these polycarbonate pieces here, which are again used for mounting the uprights. And that allows the goal to glide in. And as the robot backs up, I can show it here. It allows the goal to center pretty much from any orientation. I'll just try it again. But even if it's off center, we'll still get it in there quite nicely. And then I'll just activate the button. Oh. go. So you can see it grabs it. It's very, very secure. You're not getting it out. I'll even push it down. It tilts the robot. It's very, very secure. And the way we're able to do that is with that high strength spacer or high strength shaft collar there. And that presses up against the far edge of the goal here. So that's really nice in terms of goal security. Then also, because the goal clamp just uses two 25mm pistons, it's very little air, grabs it really nicely, really quickly, and then also releases it perfectly fine. So we're really happy with the back clamp. The next thing I'll touch on is our intake. We use 5.5 watts on the bottom stage. Roller is 600 RPM with 1.625 inch flex wheels. That's really nice for getting rings out of the corner. Let's see if we have a stack. We'll only do 2 rings for now, but our aligner mechanism can slide in there, and as the intake goes up, you can actually see we have these floating arms on the intake, and that pushes the stack up and means that when we get the bottom ring, most of the time the stack doesn't fall over, so we are able to get a fully clear corner in Auton, which is really nice. Now moving on to the hook stage, we have 16.5 watts on that. The hooks spin at 400 RPM, so the 200 RPM motor goes in there, chained 1-to-1 up to this shaft, which changes it to 400 RPM, and same thing with 5.5 watt, just chained on the side here up to that shaft, then it goes to 400 RPM. We found we really like that speed because it's very consistent, especially when we have multiple rings in the intake. We don't experience any sort of an RPM drop when we're scoring. So that's really nice for consistency, especially in skills where we have a lot of rings in our intake at the same time. And I guess I can demonstrate that working real quick. Another really nice feature of our intake was the automatic color sorting, which you just saw there. The way we do that is with this AI vision sensor, which detects the color of the rings. We have a distance sensor down there to detect when a ring is in the intake. And then using the internal motor encoders and resetting the hooks in the same position, we just use that bit right there. We're able to track which color ring we have and what hook that ring is on, so we're able to very reliably eject the rings. Is almost 100% reliable, so super nice for matches. Don't even have to worry about what we're intaking, and then that also ties into clearing the corner in autonomous. It's very reliable. We're not going to accidentally score a ring for the opposing alliance, that sort of thing. So the other thing we use that distance sensor down there for is loading our wall stake mechanism. So all the driver has to do, press a button, and as we intake, the robot automatically indexes rings up there, so you'll see it's fully ready to score. Then if we go up to a wall stake, we have that aligner there to make getting there pretty easy. Just go up here, and then everything's in position, and we can just score very quickly. So the way we're able to do that actually is with our 4-bar, which it's actually an offset 4-bar. You can see that the pivots are further apart in the back than they are in the front. So that means as the 4-bar goes up, the intake stage twists, and that makes it very easy to get between the two positions, just like so. We found that this wall stake mechanism worked very well in matches and in skills because we could score 2 rings in very quick succession. However, there were a couple problems with it. The first one is that it was pretty complex. So even with these polycarbonate strips here, we could still occasionally get rings jammed in here. Say for instance, if we missed a wall stake, we could get a ring there, and that's something we couldn't really resolve. Another problem with this mechanism is it was a little bit worse under defense and we didn't have any way to de-score wall stakes. But on the other hand, having 2 rings simultaneously was super advantageous and really contributed to us getting world record skills. And then the other thing that was really crucial to us getting world record skills was our tier 3 hang. So with our hang, there's quite a few considerations we had. You can see that we have these arms here, and we actually have a linkage, I had to take it off to test a few things, but it went from, I believe it was this hole on the 4-bar up to this hole on the hang arm. So that meant as the 4-bar went up, we would control these things with that. So we wouldn't have to have any pistons or extra motors to actuate the hang. So it really helped keep the weight of the robot down. I think we're only about 15 pounds with the tier 3 hang and the double wall stake mechanism. So it's definitely not as bad as people think. And then for hang, I already talked about the PTO. String just goes down through there. We have these spacers so that the string can go around pretty smooth, not many hiccups, and it's pretty low friction for the string. And then the string actually deploys with this piston right here. It's mounted very close to the drivetrain, and it goes up and actually controls this aligner. Pretty simple. We use a hinge there because it needed to be flush with the back of the robot in order to get past each rung. But you can see there's a threaded rod through that aligner, and we have the string going down. We have a second loop, and that's just wrapped around this other threaded rod on the shaft there, so they're both actuated by that one piston. Then as the aligner goes up, you'll see that threaded rod is free to rotate, and that releases the hang. And then the other thing is this aligner. Because we have our hang arms right here, and we have a spacer right there to keep us on the vertical rung, we had a very small window where we could successfully hang. So that aligner was pretty important in order to get the hang reliable. But we definitely recommend, if you're trying a tier 3 hang, make sure you don't have to do an aligner, and just build a robot that has more compliance or more ways that it can access the hang bar, so you don't need that super high precision in order to hang. The next thing I'll go over is just a couple of miscellaneous things. So you'll see we have our battery and pneumatics tank right there. It's very, or relatively low, could be lower, but they're mounted very light, helps keep the center of gravity nice and far forward, which is important because we have all this structure on the back as well as the mobile goal. So our center of gravity is just about above this traction wheel when we have a goal, which is what we want. We have these passive alliance stake mechanisms, so just sandwiches a ring right in there, polycarbonate so it can flex. And that allows us to very consistently score rings on the alliance stake very quickly and autonomous. So I think every single time we've used this in a match, it's scored the alliance stake. So that's huge for getting the win point consistently, and then also the autonomous win, because you just get another advantage by having that consistent top ring. Brain mounted right here. It's just on a 1x that goes up right in there. So pretty light. The AI vision sensor is actually screwed into the brain with threaded rods, so keeping it as light as possible. Then we have actually all around the robot, we have these big polycarbonate panels, which just barely fit in the 12x24 sheet with all the other stuff. But you can see everything is protected. And then also we have some distance sensors behind the polycarbonate, which a lot of people don't notice, but we use that for our localization in our programming. So that's quite nice, just having them integrated, very light, and keeps them really protected during matches. You can see our lift motors here, they're just barely above that goal clamp. So when the goal's in there, they're just barely above it. And then they're just chained up the side here. again, the chain is very protected because of these polycarbonate panels, so that's really good for ensuring our robot is very reliable during matches. We've never had these chains break. And then for the rest of the gearing, it's just pretty simple, 12 to 72. So I believe that's a 33 RPM lift. Yeah, 33 RPM lift. We have these scraps here that prevent any rings from catching on the hooks. So you can see if there's a ring on the top of a mobile goal, the hooks won't catch it, which allows us to just keep intaking. It's not a huge problem with this design because to score wall stakes, you move the intake out of the way anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. We also have our inertial sensor right down there. It's mounted on rubber links to reduce the vibrations that go to it, which we've found to help reduce the drift, so that's another thing that helps make our program more accurate and more repeatable. We have just very light intake arms. There's actually no bracing between them, so we didn't seem to have that many problems with that. And the reason why we had to do that is because as the hang expands at the back, we're not allowed to expand at the front. So a liner is rigidly mounted to the drive chassis, and then intake just very wobbly. It's not that exposed, so we can get away with doing the lighter structure. For the top intake, you'll see that it's actually just one 3x channel with cutouts for the gears. So that's actually a lot stronger than two 1x1 channels. And it's lighter because even with the extra bit of aluminum, you don't have to have a lot of screws going all the way across to hold the 1x1s together. So it actually saves weight and increases the structure overall. To grab the hang bar, we have these polycarbonate hooks, and that allows us to not only mount the lift on the same part, but it also allows it to be very low profile. Our robot, even though it's 28 wide, is about as narrow as you can go with this design, because you barely have enough space for the ring between those hooks. And the hang arm is going very, very close to those hooks, which is definitely not ideal because we have had that catch a few times, and one time that resulted in our robot falling off. Anyways, I think that's about it. If you have any questions, I'd recommend watching our hang video or our robot reveal to see the robot in action and how the linkage works between the hang arms here and the lift mechanism. But if you have any other questions, of course, you can just ask them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. But yeah, good luck at Worlds.